Olivia Carter was 26 years old when her body was shattered by a car at a rain-slicked intersection in Hartford. But the real impact came hours later as she lay broken in the ICU and heard what her mother told the hospital. "We can't come, our other daughter is walking her dog." Born into a polished upper-middle-class family in Connecticut, Olivia had spent her life trying to earn the love her sister Emily received effortlessly, only to be sidelined by a pampered Siberian husky named Apollo. This is not just a story of favoritism. It's a slow-burning psychological betrayal, where a daughter realizes she's been outranked by a dog, overlooked in her finest moments, and abandoned when she needed her parents most. But what happens when the overlooked one stops waiting and disappears entirely? Before we begin, where are you watching from right now? Drop a comment below. Because once you hear what Olivia did next, you won't be able to look away. The first thing I felt wasn't pain. It was absence. The kind of absence so loud it drowns out the beeping of machines, the hum of fluorescent lights, the rustle of a nurse's shoes across polished tile. My body was broken, yes. But what shattered me was realizing I was alone. Really, utterly alone. I blinked against the harsh lights overhead, trying to remember where I was, or even who I was. A nurse noticed my eyes fluttering and leaned over. Her name tag read Andrea. Her voice was soft, steady, like someone trained to speak near the edge of panic. "Welcome back, Olivia. You're in the ICU. Try not to move too much, honey." My mouth was dry. My chest ached. When I tried to ask the question burning through me, no sound came out. Andrea placed a gentle hand on my arm. "You've been unconscious for almost 48 hours. You were hit by a car. There's a breathing tube, but we'll remove it soon, okay?" I blinked again, once for understanding, twice for pain. But a different pain rose up then, deeper than the fractured ribs or the pins in my leg. A question. A hope. A fear. "My parents," I whispered hours later once the tube was out. "Are they here?" Andrea hesitated. That pause, just one beat too long, made my heart seize. She didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, outside my door I heard voices. 2 doctors. I don't think they knew I was awake. I wish I hadn't been. "I called her parents the night she came in," one said. "Told them we had a critical case. Life-threatening injuries. Possible brain trauma. I told them it could be their last chance to say goodbye." "What did they say?" the other asked, disbelief already in their voice. The first doctor replied, voice tight, almost embarrassed. "Her mother said, and I quote, 'We can't come right now. Our other daughter is walking her dog and needs emotional support.'" The hallway fell silent. I didn't. Tears spilled freely down my face, soaking into the bandages around my jaw. Not because I was shocked, but because deep down I wasn't. A part of me had always known. This just made it official. They weren't coming. Not even when I almost died. Andrea came in moments later and saw my face. She didn't ask what I heard. Maybe she'd heard it too. Maybe she already knew. Her expression was tight with sympathy, but she didn't try to comfort me with platitudes. Instead, she adjusted my fore and pulled the blanket higher around my shoulders. I think that's when something shifted. Not all at once. There was no lightning bolt. No cinematic swell of music. Just a slow, sickening unraveling of everything I had ever hoped for. I had nearly died, and still I wasn't worth showing up for. In those early days, while I drifted in and out of consciousness, my mind replayed things I hadn't thought about in years. Birthdays they'd missed. Recitals they'd skipped. That time I graduated at the top of my class and waited alone in the parking lot, holding my diploma like a consolation prize. I had written it all off as busyness, bad timing, misunderstanding. I had given them every excuse in the world. But now I was starting to run out of excuses. And patience. The painkillers dulled the agony, but nothing touched the sharp betrayal blooming in my chest. I wasn't angry yet. Not fully. That would come later. Right now I was just gutted. Hollowed out. Andrea sat with me one night during her break. She told me her sister stopped speaking to their family after years of emotional neglect. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "the people who are supposed to love us simply don't know how. Or they don't want to learn." I didn't reply. I couldn't. But I held on to those words the way someone might clutch a handrail while everything else falls apart. By day 3 I was able to sip water, move my fingers, speak in full sentences. Still no sign of my family. No flowers. No cards. No phone calls. Just silence. The kind of silence that confirms what you've always feared. Maybe, just maybe, you never mattered at all. And in that silence something else began to grow. Something stronger than sadness. Because in the darkest hours when love doesn't come, sometimes strength does. In that stillness I made a vow I didn't fully understand yet. But I would. In the absence of their presence I began remembering things. Not just the betrayal. The pattern. The imbalance that started long before I lay broken in a hospital bed. And I would need to return to the beginning to truly see what brought me here. Because understanding the past was the only way to take back my future. I didn't want to remember. But the silence in that hospital room made it impossible not to. The emptiness echoed louder than any monitor, pulling me backward through years of quiet erasure. We grew up in a picture-perfect neighborhood in Westport, Connecticut. Tree-lined streets. A two-story colonial with a white picket fence. From the outside we looked ideal. My mother, Karen, was a polished real estate agent with a wardrobe of neutrals and pearls. My father, Richard, a financial advisor who liked to tell jokes no one laughed at. My sister, Emily, 3 years older, effortlessly loud in every room she entered. And then there was me, the second daughter. The quieter one. The one who always waited her turn. It didn't start with cruelty. Not exactly. Just contrast. Emily demanded attention and I assumed it was my job to stay out of the way. She didn't get better grades. She didn't have special talents. But she always got noticed. Always got more. Then Apollo arrived. A fluffy Siberian husky with striking blue eyes and a price tag that could have paid for my entire semester of books. He was a birthday gift for Emily's 24th. But really he became something else. The center of our family orbit. Apollo didn't just have toys, he had a custom-built toy wall. He didn't go for walks, he attended dog enrichment outings. He had a wellness coach, a canine therapist, a nutritionist. He had his own holiday stocking. His own Instagram. And soon his own sound system installed in the basement for anxiety-calming music. They called it Apollo's Wellness Center. I called it the reason my Cornell student loan forms were still on the kitchen table, ignored. The favoritism had always been there like a gas leak, unseen but suffocating. But Apollo was the match that made it explode. It was the little things at first. When I sang in high school choir, my mom asked me to stop practicing in the house because Apollo gets nervous with high notes. When I brought home 2 trophies after breaking school swim records, they were tucked into a box in the attic because Apollo gets skittish around reflective surfaces. Emily joked once that Apollo needed more emotional support than I did. No one laughed. No one disagreed. But what stung the most, what lodged deepest, was the Grand Canyon trip. We'd planned it for months. A full week together before I began my final year at college. I'd cleared my schedule. Even taken unpaid time off from my summer internship. I was excited. Desperate really. I wanted us to have something that felt like family again. 2 days before the flight, Emily announced that Apollo had an upset stomach. My mother canceled the trip on the spot. "We can't leave him," she said as if it were obvious. "He's not feeling well." I remember staring at her, trying to find the line between reality and madness. But she was serious. They all were. Emily even asked me to research home remedies for canine indigestion, to help. Instead of hiking trails with sunrise views, I spent that week listening to updates about Apollo's bowel movements echo through the house. I sat on the porch alone, my backpack still packed. After graduation I landed a decent job in Hartford. The kind where I had to stretch every dollar to afford groceries, rent, and chip away at student loans. I was proud of that. I was trying. But while I skipped meals to pay my electric bill, my parents hosted Apollo's 3rd birthday, complete with a balloon arch, gourmet treats, and a dog-shaped cake. The entire backyard was transformed into a pup spa retreat. When I mentioned how tight things were, my mother nodded vaguely and changed the subject. Emily asked if I'd seen Apollo's latest photo shoot. I started therapy. Dr. Evans was the first person who said the word out loud. Favoritism. "How does that feel?" she asked. "To be overlooked in favor of a pet?" "Invisible," I answered. "Like I don't exist. Like I'm extra." Still a part of me held on. I clung to the hope that success would earn me space at their table. If I just achieved enough, became enough, maybe then they'd notice. Maybe then they'd finally see me. And so I pushed harder. At work. In life. I kept chasing a version of love that looked like recognition. What I didn't know then, what I would learn in the hardest way possible, was that sometimes no matter how much you give, you will never be enough for the people who refuse to value you. And that truth would soon come crashing into my carefully constructed world with more force than I could have imagined. Because my next big moment, the one I thought would change everything, was already waiting for me. The first time I let myself believe they might finally show up was 3 weeks before the biggest presentation of my career. I'd been working at Hartley & Company for nearly 3 years, rising from junior associate to campaign lead. It had cost me everything, nights, weekends, my social life, but it was finally paying off. I'd been shortlisted for a promotion to senior marketing director. Just me and one other candidate. The final decision would come after we each presented a campaign pitch at a formal executive dinner. This wasn't just a career milestone. It was a lifeline. The promotion came with a significant raise, enough to ease the pressure of student loans and stop counting coins for groceries. Immense stability, recognition, a kind of legitimacy I'd never had. And I wanted them to see it. I knew it was a risk, but I called my parents and invited them. I practiced the words like I was applying for a loan. It would mean a lot if you came. I've worked really hard for this. To my surprise, my mother sounded enthusiastic. That sounds wonderful, Olivia, she said. Your father and I would love to be there. Just send us the details. My chest tightened, not with fear but with something dangerously close to hope. Over the next 2 weeks I refined every slide, memorized every stat. I picked out a charcoal suit and a silk blouse I'd only wear for something this important. At night I imagined their faces in the crowd, smiling, proud. I allowed myself to believe, just for once, that I'd matter. 4 days before the presentation, a group text from Emily popped up on my phone. Family meeting. Tonight. 7 p.m. Important. I should have ignored it. But I didn't. When I walked into my parents' living room that evening, Emily was pacing in front of the fireplace. Apollo lay on his custom orthopedic dog bed, his chin resting dramatically on his paws. Something's wrong, Emily began, her voice heavy with urgency. Apollo's therapist says he's showing signs of emotional regression. Possibly canine depression. He needs more structured support. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. I've scheduled intensive family therapy sessions, she continued. The first one is Thursday at 6 p.m. Mandatory. We all need to be there to help Apollo regulate. Thursday, 6. The exact time of my presentation dinner. I looked from her to my parents, waiting for someone to say what I assumed was obvious. I told you both about this weeks ago, I said carefully. You said you'd come. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. Honey, Apollo's mental health is serious. You know how sensitive he is. He needs his family. Emily chimed in like she was explaining gravity. Your work thing can probably be rescheduled, right? This is about Apollo's well-being. My father placed a hand on my shoulder, awkward and heavy. We're really sorry about the conflict, sweetheart. But Apollo's been part of this family for 5 years. And I've been part of this family for 26, I said, my voice barely steady. The silence that followed was answer enough. I drove home in a fog, headlights blurring through tears. I didn't cry out of sadness anymore. I cried because something inside me had finally snapped. This wasn't about oversight. This wasn't about bad timing. This was about truth. They would never choose me. Not when it mattered. And yet I showed up that Thursday night. I stood in the mirror of the upscale restaurant bathroom, smoothing the fabric of my suit with shaking hands. I gave myself a final pep talk. You don't need them here, I whispered. You've done this on your own all along. And I had. The presentation went better than I could have hoped. I spoke clearly, confidently. My pitch landed. People laughed in the right places, asked smart questions. By the time dessert was served, I could tell I had nailed it. Afterward, my colleagues dragged me out for celebratory drinks. For a few hours, surrounded by people who respected me, I almost forgot that my seat had been empty. But the moment I stepped into the rain that night, walking alone under the city lights, the silence crept back in. I wondered as I crossed the street with the signal blinking white, whether they'd even asked how it went. Whether they cared. I never saw the car that ran the red light. I only heard the screech, saw the glare, and felt the brutal, sudden weight of impact. And in that instant, as my body was thrown through the air, only one thought crossed my mind. Would this finally be enough to make them come? The sound of tires skidding across wet asphalt still haunts me. That horrible screech, the helpless gasps from people nearby, the dull, sickening thud of metal slamming against bone, it all blends together now in memory. But in that moment, it was excruciatingly clear. A flash of light. The sensation of flying. The disorienting awareness of my body being thrown, disconnected from control. I hit the pavement hard. My phone skittered across the road. Someone screamed. Someone else knelt beside me saying not to move, that help was coming. Rain fell on my face, mingling with blood, soaking into my suit. I tried to speak, to ask for help, but all that came out was a choking gurgle. As sirens wailed in the distance, one strange, simple thought pressed itself into my mind with unbearable weight. Will they come? Would this finally be enough? Then the darkness swallowed everything. When I opened my eyes again, it was to the rhythmic beeping of machines and a fluorescent buzz that felt like an interrogation light. My limbs were heavy. My chest ached with every breath. My right leg was trapped in a brace and a dull, searing pain throbbed in my ribs. Andrea was there again, her presence like a lighthouse in the storm. She told me I'd been in surgery. That I'd been unconscious for nearly 2 days. Broken ribs, a punctured lung, head trauma, multiple fractures. It was a miracle I was alive. I asked the question even though I already knew the answer. Did my family come? She didn't lie. She didn't soften the truth. She shook her head once. Later I overheard them again. Andrea and a doctor just outside the door, voices low but not low enough. I called them myself, the doctor said. I told them she might not survive the night. I said this was critical. And do you know what her mother said? Pause. Then, we can't come right now. Our other daughter is walking her dog and needs emotional support. It was so absurd, so incomprehensible, that the silence afterward rang louder than any alarm. That was the moment I stopped making excuses for them. Not even death, or the threat of it, could pull them close. I didn't cry. Not then. There was no energy left for grief. Only a quiet, sinking realization that I had spent 26 years loving people who saw me as optional. Andrea stayed by my side when she could. She brought warm blankets. Sat quietly during her breaks. He never pushed. She never tried to fill the void left by their absence. She simply stayed. The day after the breathing tube came out, I spoke for the first time. I heard, I rasped. Andrea didn't pretend not to know what I meant. She placed a hand over mine and said, I'm sorry. That word, it wasn't enough to mend anything, but it acknowledged the wound. And sometimes that's what matters more than any excuse. A few days later, my phone, retrieved and charged by the hospital staff, was returned to me. There were dozens of messages from coworkers. Maya had visited twice, leaving a bag with essentials. There were emails from colleagues and distant friends. But nothing from my parents. Nothing from Emily. Until day 5. I was half sitting, propped on pillows, when the phone buzzed with a familiar ringtone. Emily. My heart skipped. Maybe this was it. Maybe they'd realized. Maybe this would be different. Hey Olivia, Emily said breezily, like she was calling from a cafe. Sorry to hear about your accident. That sounds rough. Yeah, I said, my voice thin. It's been serious. Well, I just wanted to let you know Apollo got these amazing new therapeutic toys. They're supposed to be groundbreaking for canine anxiety. I posted the unboxing on Instagram. You should check it out if you're bored in there. She talked for 3 minutes. All of it about Apollo. Not once did she ask how I was. Not once did she mention coming to visit. She hung up because it was time for Apollo's afternoon walk. I stared at the ceiling for a long time after the call ended. My chest burned, not from injury but from clarity. The pain I had been carrying all my life, the longing, the desperate hope, had nowhere to go now. And in its place something else was beginning to grow. Not grief. Not fear. Bigger. Focused. And strangely empowering. Because I finally understood. If no one was coming to save me, then I would have to save myself. And that decision would change everything. The door swung open so fast I barely had time to react. Andrea had warned me, but still I wasn't ready. Not for them. Not like this. My mother came in first, balancing a balloon bouquet shaped like dogs. Look who's here to cheer you up, she said brightly, gesturing toward the foot of the bed where Emily stood, leash in hand. And at the end of it, Apollo wearing a vest that read Certified Therapy Dog, though I knew full well he'd never passed any training. No flowers. No card. No apology. Just a helium balloon that said, "Feel better woof soon." They were smiling like this was a casual drop-in. Like the last week hadn't happened. Like I hadn't been lying in this bed, tubes in my body, wondering if I would die alone. "You look better than we expected," Dad offered from behind them. He hovered near the door, stiff as if afraid to come closer. "When exactly were you expecting to see how I looked?" I asked. My voice didn't rise, but something in the room shifted. My mother's smile faltered. Emily looked away. "Olivia," Mom said with that clipped, overly patient tone I knew too well, "it's been a very difficult time. Apollo sensed something was wrong and he's been having separation anxiety. He hasn't been eating. The behaviorist said he needs stability." I stared at her. At all of them. "I was unconscious," I said. "The doctor told you I might not survive the night." "Don't be dramatic," Emily cut in, rolling her eyes. "You're clearly fine." "I'm not fine," I replied, lifting my arm to show the IVs. "I've had 3 surgeries. I've been fighting infection. Alone." "We would have come," Dad said, "if it had really been life or death. But Apollo was in crisis." That was it. That was the moment. The moment something inside me cracked. Not in a messy, explosive way, but in a clean, final snap. I needed family support and they gave it to a dog. "You've always been so independent," Mom added, shrugging. "Apollo just needs us more." For the next 30 minutes, the conversation revolved entirely around Apollo's emotional wellness. His struggles. His therapy. His supplements. Not one question about my pain. Not one word about my recovery. Then Emily pulled out her phone. "Let's take some photos for Instagram," she said. "People have been asking how Apollo's holding up." Before I could protest, she was angling her body next to mine. "Smile, Olivia. You look kind of awful. Can you try to look less pale?" I didn't move. I couldn't. He snapped the photo anyway. When they finally glanced at the clock, my mom gasped. "Oh, we should get going. Apollo has a grooming appointment at 3. If we're late, they charge a rescheduling fee." "You're leaving," I said. "After half an hour." "It's not like you were actually dying," Mom replied, grabbing her bag. That's when the decision made itself. "Get out," I said quietly. My father looked up, confused. "What?" "Get out of my room. All of you." They froze. Emily's mouth opened, but no sound came. "You chose a dog's walk over possibly saying goodbye to your dying daughter. You waited a week. And now you're leaving for a grooming appointment. Get out." "Olivia, don't be unreasonable," Mom said, voice rising. "No," I said louder now. "I'm not being unreasonable. I'm finally seeing things clearly. I've spent my life trying to earn your love while you gave it freely to Emily and now to her dog. I've won awards. I've pushed myself until I broke. And still I was never enough." Emily scoffed. "This is exactly why Apollo gets more attention. He doesn't throw tantrums." "My tantrum was asking you to visit me in the hospital." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just said, "We have nothing left to say to each other." Dad tried again. "You don't mean that. You're upset. You're medicated." I've never been clearer. They left in stiff silence. Emily muttered something about ingratitude. Apollo, the last to exit, leapt off the bed, his paws jarring my healing leg. As the door clicked shut, I sat in stillness, tears sliding down my face. Not from heartbreak. That had come and gone. But from something else. Something quieter. More dangerous. Relief. Later that night, Andrea found me awake. She didn't ask what happened. She simply sat with me. And I said it aloud for the first time. "I'm leaving. Not the hospital. Not the city. Everything." She looked at me carefully. "You mean for good?" "Yes." I didn't know where yet. Well, but I would disappear. And this time they'd have to live with my absence. Because I was done living with theirs. The van that carried me away from the hospital didn't have sirens. No lights. Just a soft hum and the low voice of the driver confirming our route out of Hartford. Andrea had handled everything. The private medical transport, a short-term lease in Boston, a bag with essentials from my apartment. The hospital discharged me against medical advice. But with the support of my care team, including Dr. Chin and social worker Jennifer, I signed every waiver with a steady hand. The moment I crossed the state line, I wasn't running anymore. I was rebuilding. My new place was a tiny studio in a converted brick building. The elevator creaked. The mattress was thin. The sofa was secondhand. But it was mine. There were no dog toys scattered across the floor. No voices interrupting to talk about chewable vitamins or barking therapy. Just silence. A pure, almost jarring silence. The first few days were brutal. 10 steps to the bathroom felt like climbing Everest. I burned toast and nearly dropped the kettle trying to make tea with one hand. My leg throbbed with every movement. My ribs didn't let me sleep. But somehow the pain gave me purpose. Each tiny task I managed felt like proof. That I could survive without them. That I could exist without being ignored. Charlotte, my neighbor from 3B, was the first face I met. She knocked on day 2 holding a potted plant and a thermos of soup. "Hi. I heard someone moved in recovering from something awful. Figured you might need a friend who doesn't suck." She didn't ask questions. She didn't push. She just sat on the floor and talked about graphic design, houseplants, and how her last roommate was secretly a magician who kept doves in the closet. I laughed for the first time in weeks. And when she left, I didn't feel alone. Felt human. Maya kept checking in too from afar. She updated my coworkers, explained what she could without betraying my privacy. Rachel, my boss, sent a terse but kind email. "Your promotion is confirmed. We'll support remote work as long as needed. Just focus on healing." That night I cried again. But this time it wasn't grief. It was relief. Still, the ghosts hadn't fully left me. One afternoon an email landed in my inbox. Subject: Apollo misses you. It was from Emily. I froze. My breath hitched. For a second I considered deleting it unread. But I opened it. "Everyone thinks you're being selfish and dramatic. Mom cried at Christmas dinner because you weren't there to take the family photo. Apollo has been mopey. He's lost weight. He misses your voice. No mention of my recovery. No concern for my health. Just guilt. Wrapped in fur and manipulation." I blocked the sender without replying. Then I closed my laptop and grabbed my cane. I walked slowly to the small window that overlooked the alley and whispered aloud, "I am not responsible for their discomfort." It became a mantra. I joined an online support group for adults estranged from toxic families. The forum was full of people with stories that mirrored mine. People whose absence had triggered outrage rather than reflection. People who had walked away to preserve what was left of their identity. We had a virtual Thanksgiving together. We raised paper cups to freedom. Someone toasted, to setting boundaries and choosing peace. I whispered it back to myself. Charlotte brought me journals, books, frozen meals, and once a basket of mismatched socks because they make sad days weirdly better. She didn't ask about my past. He didn't need to. He was there. And she stayed. When the first snowfall blanketed Boston, I stood by the window watching the flakes swirl past the glass. The pain in my legs still flared in the cold. My ribs still ached if I moved too fast. But inside something was thawing. A quiet truth taking shape. I had not escaped. I had arrived. This apartment, this quiet, imperfect space. It was a sanctuary. A place where no one measured my worth by how well I played along with dysfunction. Where healing didn't have to be visible to be real. And just as I began to breathe fully again, an invitation appeared. An industry conference in Chicago. A chance to present. To grow. To stand tall on a stage once more. I hesitated. Because I knew who lived 2 hours from Chicago. And I had a feeling this time they would not stay silent. The ballroom smelled like cologne, fresh brewed coffee, and ambition. It buzzed with low conversation, business cards exchanging hands, name tags flashing under warm chandelier light. The air at the Chicago Marketing Summit felt alive with potential. For a few hours I could almost forget the past. Almost. My presentation was scheduled for the second morning. I'd spent the evening before walking the quiet streets near the hotel, rehearsing not just my speech, but the emotional armor I knew I needed to wear. It wasn't just nerves about presenting. It was what waited in the shadows. Because I knew they were nearby. 2 hours away in a town I hadn't returned to since disappearing from their lives. And thanks to a conversation Maya had with my mother weeks earlier, at a grocery store of all places, I had no doubt they knew I would be here. Still, I told myself they wouldn't show. They hadn't shown up when I was dying. Why no? But when I stepped on stage and scanned the audience, my stomach dropped. Third row. Cinder. Side by side. My parents. They looked older. Smaller somehow. My father's hair had gone fully gray. My mother's face was thinner, her pearl necklace still intact like a badge of consistency. Both of them stared up at me, unreadable. I steadied my breath. And began. I spoke about brand strategy, behavioral targeting, digital trust. I delivered data with precision, stories with humor, insight with authority. The audience responded exactly how I'd hoped. Engaged, nodding, impressed. But the whole time I felt their eyes on me like heat through glass. When I stepped off stage to applause, I kept my eyes ahead. I fielded questions. Accepted business cards. Smiled for photos. I did not turn toward them. I thought that would be it. A silent, distant encounter. I was wrong. Later that evening, as I walked into the hotel restaurant for dinner, I saw them. Sitting at a corner table, clearly waiting. My father raised a hesitant hand when he saw me. I stopped. I could have walked away. Gone back to my room. But something rooted me there. Curiosity, perhaps, or the need to finish what I had started by leaving. I approached. "Hello," I said. Even flat. My mother stood, eyes wide. "Olivia. You look wonderful." "May we buy you dinner?" my father asked, gesturing to the empty seat across from them. I paused. "Wait it. I'll give you 30 minutes, I said. And sat down, posture straight, voice calm. Silence stretched between us. The server came, took our orders. When she left, Dad cleared his throat. "We need to apologize," he said. "For what, exactly?" I asked. "For missing every important moment of my life. For choosing a dog over your daughter's hospital bed." My mother's eyes welled. "We never meant to make you feel that way. We love you. We love all our children equally." "Apollo is not your child," I said, voice low but sharp. "And no, you didn't. You didn't love us equally. You loved what was easy. What was loud. What demanded." They looked down. "It's been a difficult year," Dad murmured. The not knowing. The silence. The questions from friends. I laughed quietly. "You're still making this about yourselves." Before they could reply, I heard it. The leash. The clicking of paws. Jessica stormed into the restaurant, Apollo in tow, eyes darting. When she saw us, she headed over like a heat-seeking missile. "I knew it," she snapped. "Secret family meeting without me?" "Jessica," Dad said, voice low. "Please." "No," she barked. "You promised we'd confront her together. Apollo and I have been waiting in the car for an hour." I stood. "This was a mistake. Don't you dare walk away again," Jessica hissed. She grabbed my arm. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? Apollo developed stress-induced alopecia because of you." I removed her hand with quiet precision. "You're still more concerned about your dog's fur than your sister's life. That's why I left." Jessica sputtered. "We're family." "Family shows up," I replied. "Family cares. Family doesn't assign value based on silence." My parents watched, frozen. Apollo sniffed the floor, oblivious. I turned to them. "If you want any relationship with me, these are my conditions. Respect. Accountability. And no more prioritizing a dog over your daughter." Jessica scoffed. "You don't get to set terms." "Actually," I said, "I do." I placed cash on the table, enough for my untouched meal. "I'm staying at this hotel until Thursday. If you want something real, you know where to find me. But I won't chase any of you again." Then I walked away. For the first time, they didn't follow. Back in my room, I called Charlotte. She answered on the first ring. "How did it go?" "Exactly as expected," I said. But I said what needed to be said. And for the first time in years, I meant it. The envelope was plain. Cream-colored. No name, no return address. The hotel receptionist handed it to me the following afternoon as I returned from a workshop. "This was left for you earlier," she said, setting it gently on the counter like it might bruise. Inside was a folded note in my mother's handwriting. "We're staying at the Holiday Inn 3 blocks away. No Jessica. No Apollo. Just us. If you're willing, we'd like to talk tomorrow. Text this number if you can meet." There was no pleading. No manipulation. Just that. A request. And for once, it came without the shadow of a leash. I sat with the letter for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I finally knew I had a choice. My healing didn't depend on what they would say. This meeting wouldn't fix the past. But maybe, just maybe, it could offer clarity. The next afternoon, I met them in a quiet cafe with high ceilings and soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. They were already seated, a single cup of untouched coffee between them. "Thank you for coming," Dad said as I sat. "I want to be clear," I said before they could continue. "This isn't a reset. I'm not here to pretend the past didn't happen. I'm here to see if you're finally ready to listen." Mom nodded slowly. "We are." I spoke. I told them about the years of being ignored. The way Emily's wants had always mattered more than my needs. The erasure. The vacations cancelled, the birthdays forgotten, the trophies boxed away. I described what it felt like to lie in a hospital bed and realize I could die and no one would come. I talked about pain, not just physical but emotional. A lifetime of being less. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I delivered the words like testimony. Plain, sharp, undeniable. When I finished, my mother was crying. Not softly, not dramatically, just tears slipping down her cheeks, her hands trembling around the ceramic cup. "I don't know if we can fix this," she said. "But I want to try. I've missed my daughter. And I've missed having parents who valued me," I replied. Then my father spoke, his voice low. "After you left, things changed. We started therapy. Both of us. Individually and together. We've had to look at patterns, ugly ones." "And Emily?" I asked. There was a pause. Mom sighed. "She refuses to go. She doesn't think anything's wrong. Our relationship with her is strained now." That surprised me. For so long she'd been untouchable. The golden child. The one everything revolved around. But now even she wasn't exempt from consequence. "I can't promise forgiveness," I told them. "Not quickly. Not completely. But I'm open to limited contact. Phone calls. Letters. Visits, maybe, eventually. But everything comes with boundaries. The first sign of old patterns, I walk away. For good." "That's more than we deserve," Dad said, his voice tight with emotion. As we left the cafe, my mother handed me a small package. Just some photos. From over the years. No pressure to keep them. That night in my hotel room, I opened the package. Inside were pictures I'd never seen. Me in a swim cap, grinning with 2 gold medals. Me on graduation day, cap askew, standing alone on a field. Me blowing out birthday candles, eyes bright. They had seen more than I thought. But they had never shown it. 2 days later, I boarded a plane back to Boston. Back to the quiet apartment I had made into something whole. Charlotte met me at the airport with takeout and a sarcastic sign that read, "Welcome home, Queen of Boundaries." I laughed. And meant it. 6 months passed. Then a year. The cane gathered dust in the corner. My scars faded from raw to silver. I joined a local swimming club. I mentored new hires on my marketing team. My circle grew. Neighbors, friends, support group members. People who showed up. One spring afternoon, I got an email from Emily. "Paul misses you. Mom cried at Easter. You're tearing this family apart." I didn't respond. I deleted it. Blocked the address. And breathed. On the anniversary of my accident, Charlotte, Tasha, and 2 others from my chosen family took me to Cape Cod. We watched the sun rise in silence, waves lapping at our feet. To Olivia, Charlotte toasted that night over dinner. Who taught us all what courage really looks like. I raised my glass. And for the first time I felt the truth settle into my bones. Sometimes the people who should love you never will. But that has nothing to do with your worth. Because family is not defined by blood. It's defined by presence. By care. By choice. And I had finally chosen me. And that's my story. Not one of sudden revenge or dramatic redemption, but of reclaiming my voice, my boundaries, and the quiet power of walking away. I used to think survival meant holding on no matter how much it hurt. Now I know true strength lives in the letting go, of false hopes, of the need to be chosen, of people who only love on their terms. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, I hope this reminded you that you're not alone, and more importantly that you deserve better. Have you ever had to make the painful choice to protect your peace, even if it meant leaving people behind? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about healing, self-worth, and finding your own way forward. Because sometimes, the most powerful story you can tell is the one where you finally choose yourself.